Welcome everyone to our second event. I am here with four phenomenal panelists. I'm very excited to hear their insights as to how they deal with balancing work, teaching, and parenthood, because Lord knows parenthood, oof, it can be tough. So my name is Shelby Guy. I am an assistant professor at Michigan State University. I would love for our panelists to go forward and introduce themselves, their name, title, background, and because we're focusing on parenthood, if you talk about who, who your children are, that would be helpful. So I'm happy to go first. So I mentioned that assistant professor at MSU. I also have a 13-month-old who would not go to sleep last night at 3:30. So it was very fitting to get me in the right mind space for this talk. I'm going to pass it off to Nitya.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nitya Chawla. I am an assistant professor at the University of Minnesota. I have a 2.5-year-old boy who is like he is on another realm when it comes to energy, and I wish I could be him, but that becomes a big part of the managing part of it. One of the unique aspects for us was that I was pregnant during COVID and I gave birth during COVID, like when COVID was still ongoing. And so that has very much shaped my parenthood journey and what those initial years looked like. And it's still a little bit traumatic, and I'm happy to share anything related to that.
Sunkee.
Hi, my name is Sunkee. I'm associate professor at Tepper School at Carnegie Mellon University. We have a 18-month-old at home. He didn't sleep. He didn't wake up during the night, but he woke up very early this morning. So I'm also very tired. Like Nitya, our son is very active, so he keeps us on our toes. And we're actually expecting our second one in September. So that's kind of the news on my side.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and it's another boy, so people are telling me congratulations and condolences, which I kind of get now. I'm like, okay, I see what you mean.
Fantastic. Joanna.
Yeah, I'm Joanna. I'm associate professor at the University of Georgia, and I have two boys, so I totally get what Sunkee means, like condolence. Yes, I have two boys. My house is always crazy. They are 3 years old and 8 years old. And the 3 years old, he went to daycare, always got sick. My students always ask me, like, when are you healthy, right? Like, I feel like I'm always sick. The kids are always sick. He's like, what do you get this week? Like, we always have different kinds of sickness, flu, whatever in my home. Actually, my 3 years old just got a fever today as well. Like it's always crazy. But we're like, so I feel like balancing things, parenthood, this is something that I'm passionate about because this is my daily life. It's like trying to like balance this.
Phenomenal. Yeah, the illness is just, they keep on coming. It's unending. I remember in school they talked about, oh, sharing is not caring, and as a sharer I was all like, no, sharing is caring, it's great. And now I'm, as a parent, I'm like, sharing is not caring, sharing is very much not caring. This is not ideal there. Let me just add, oops, remove all spotlighted for everyone. Oh, sure. I wanted to add our final panelist. Yeah, welcome, thank you so much for joining.
Hi, Shelby. Hi, everyone.
Yeah,
Sorry I'm late.
no worries.
Connecting
We're just doing
duties.
introductions. So just who you are, your title, background, and then a tidbit of what of your, of being a parent, of like who are your children? What catastrophe have they brought on your life?
Hi, everyone. My name is Yi Li. I'm an associate professor of management at the University of California, Riverside. I have two kids, 7 and 9, both boys. I had them both before tenure, which is a big part of my story here. And I'm happy to come and share whatever bits of wisdom I've gleaned, if they're at all valid.
Oh, it's gonna be so great. So we have a couple dual boy situations that are going on here. I am excited to delve into that. But I do want to start us off with the reason why we're here, which is talking about this work-life balance. We know that practitioners talk about work-life balance of their 9 to 5 going back home. We have a slightly different version of that, right? So I do want to ask both to the extent that, and this is coming from one of the questions from our panelists, of how do you keep the division between your research, teaching, and parent or like life, non-academic life, separate? How do you make it so that the stresses from any of those essentially don't bleed into each other? I'm happy to throw it out to the panelists who would like to get us started.
So I guess I can start. I mean, so how I've been kind of managing the balance was sending the kid to daycare, and it wasn't an easy kind of decision, I think, in the beginning, and especially coming from an Asian Korean background, my parents or adults around me would say, "Oh, like how could you send a baby that's less than or 2, 3 years old to daycare? How dare you? They're gonna forget about you. They're not gonna think of you as a parent and all these bad stuff." And you know, and you get the look from like Asian, people, like adults, when you say, "Oh, like my kid is 9 months old and he's now enrolled in daycare," and that was a little bit of struggle. But I came to believe that I made the right decision, I think. And why I do think so is, to me, like work balance is being able to do enough of both things, like work and my personal life. And it doesn't mean that I'm doing like 8 hours work and 8 hours of my life, but it just, in my standards, am I doing enough, and am I focused during the time that I'm doing these kind of things? And so we send our kid to daycare from 9:30 to 4:30, and during the time I really try to focus on my work and get whatever done during that time. But one thing I promise with my wife is that once the baby comes home, like we really are gonna spend just time with him. And that means like no computers, no phones, no TV, nothing else, and just really sitting there and hanging out with him. And for us, I think daycare really helped us to do that. And I feel like our relationship, all three of us have a really good relationship with each other. And I feel that the baby has a lot of trust in us. And we don't feel guilty about that either. That we are spending, probably, I say 4 hours at the end of the day with him. And so for us, I think that was the good solution, and I'm curious to hear more from the other panelists, see if I'm doing it the right way, or am I just kind of trying to justify what I'm doing here.
I can kind of jump in next. Oh, Joanna, do you want to go first?
Oh, I will jump in after you.
Okay. Okay. So we had a bit of a different story. We actually weren't able to send our son to daycare, right, because of the pandemic. So for about until he was vaccinated, and unfortunately had already experienced COVID, he went in about a year and a half. And that was a rough period of time of having him home all the time. And all of us being home all the time as well, right? But I really want to pick up on something that Sunkee said, which is like, we have struggled over the years to try and explain the arrangements that work for our family. So whether that's daycare, same thing, right? So both my husband and I, we had stay-at-home moms, and our son does not have that clearly. And so whether it's daycare or oftentimes it's a babysitter as well, right? My mom has actually told me before, she was just like, "I would never leave my kid alone and go anywhere." And I was like, "Well, I respect that, but like there are aspects of my life that I wouldn't be able to enjoy and do, and parts of my career I wouldn't be able to be part of if that was the mentality I had, right?" And so I think some of it is like it is really difficult to unlearn some of those Asian perspectives on things, and yeah, there are days where there's guilt for sure. I also have a traveling spouse, which is very unique, which means like he is traveling every 10 to 12 days, so I solo parent a lot. And so one of the things that I've come to just be okay with is like, my kid is not going to be the first kid to be picked up from daycare. Like that's just, I can't do that. So sometimes he might be the second last or the last, and that's okay. He's still happy there. He's still thriving. There are aspects of daycare that I think have just done wonders for him developmentally. And it allows me to like do all the things that I do at home, including like getting ready for dinner for him after a full work day. And we're the same, right? So like when he comes home, it's us time. Like there's no laptop out. I'm also working. I can go back to work after he goes to bed, but during that period of time, whether that's in the mornings or in the evenings when he's home, that's very much the time where we prioritize him and our family together. Joanna.
Yeah, I feel like I hear your story makes me feel like, oh my God, it's the same. Like I feel like my parents always feel like you're such a great parents. Like you, my kids when they're little, I didn't send them to daycare, but I hired a lot of help. I have probably 3 nannies at my house always. One, like I have one nanny taking care of my older one take care of my little one, and one cook. So my house is always like having lots of people to come and help me because I feel like I'm always overwhelmed. At first, I was like, oh, maybe I can do it. For my first one, I feel like I can do it. No, like he was on my arm napping while I'm like writing the discussion section of a paper. But then I feel like I'm burnt out. I can't do this. And I feel like my brain is always like, like not clear. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, no, I never have a good night of sleep. Then I feel like maybe it's time for me to ask for help. So I hired lots of babysitters, nanny, and it really helps me, like right after I got home, the dinner is ready, someone cooked for us. So we can have a meal together. Then after that, I can take the kids out if they want to go out for a walk, they want to play soccer, basketball, or something like that. So then I can enjoy the time with them and have that quality of the time. And I feel like that really helps me. And that sort of helped me to balance things out. And as for research, I feel like as I said, like there are some time. So then I feel like I become more efficient. And I know like whenever I go to work, this is my time for working. I hope like, to be very efficient, I don't spend lots of time like wandering or checking on Facebook or, like spending sometimes like not doing something efficient, right? If I'm at work, I want to finish my work. I become very motivated. I was like, okay, these are the things I want to write. And once I'm done, I can go home and enjoy my time with my family.
Yeah, here are a lot of common themes. I think work-life balance is definitely slightly different for different people. For me, it meant sacrifice. We all know that parenting is going to come with sacrifices. Essentially, it's all sacrifices because kids take up a lot of time and they really don't give much back until much later. I would say that I'm starting to reap some of those rewards now, but it's really until they're adults and you see, I've done a good job, that you really see those. My kids were in daycare for the younger ones starting from 3 months, for the older ones starting from 6 weeks. So basically we got them in there as early as possible. And similarly, we're one of the first people in, one of the last people out, almost always the last person out, actually, oftentimes calling the office saying, I'm going to be late. One of the things that I found was particularly difficult from a researcher perspective is that my most productive hours are actually in the late afternoon. Like I'm past the lunchtime lull. This is when I'm doing my prime writing time. And a lot of times I'd be checking my watch and thinking, oh shoot, I have to go get my kids soon. I was the primary drop off and pickup person. And that meant my writing time would just end sharply. And it was very painful for me because, when you're in that flow state, it's really hard to get back into it and have that productivity. So it came with a realization that I'm just not going to be as productive. It used to be that I would let my work bleed into weekends. I don't have weekends nearly as much anymore. When my kids were younger, I would spend some time working on weekends. Nowadays, that their weekends are so busy, there's sports and play dates and all sorts of things that take up time. And I want to be able to spend that time in a quality way with them. So I want to be there. So I just don't have weekends. I spend my evenings with my wife. If I don't have that, then our relationship suffers. So parenting is not just about finding a balance between kids and work, but also your spouse, because if you don't work on your marriage, that will also fall apart. That is the easiest thing to lose when you start having kids. So the term balance is a very good choice of words, because it really is a balancing act, and you have to pick your sacrifices. And like everyone else, you really have to learn, schedule my work in a way that you don't allow distractions. And that's not to say we're not human. We're going to have distractions, right? I'm not going to pretend I don't check my Facebook at least once or twice during the day, but you spend much less time on it. You don't have that, okay, I'll just leave it for the weekend. I'll just leave it for the evening, because those are also now scheduled times to spend time with other special people in your life.
Yeah, procrastination is not a luxury that we can enjoy as much as we did before being parents. My kid is also in daycare currently, right? Which is why after this I might try to sneak in a nap or something to try to recover from last night. But I had literally put his name on the submitted daycare forms when I was about 3 or 4 months pregnant, and that just because I was just like, we need this as an option. Once we have that the opportunity, right, essentially to send them to daycare, then we can sort of make that. But just with childcare offerings in the U.S., it can be quite challenging there. I will say though, because it's an AABA session, and our cultural background is very important. My dad, who came to visit about a month ago, was just like, let me take your son home with us. And my parents live in Hawaii, right? Let me take him home. You don't need to send him to daycare. Your mom will watch after him. And I'm like, for how long? Oh, just until he's 2. Again, my son at that point was a little less than a year old. And I was just like, no, that's just not possible, right? But it is sort of this tension of, what do I want to achieve as an individual person? What do I want to achieve as a parent for my child? How do I balance some of these potentially competing demands? And as a strategy scholar, we often talk about how you can't maximize across all dimensions, right? So you just try to optimize as best as you can. And sometimes that optimization attempt doesn't work out as well as you'd like. That being said, we've been focusing on sort of the division, right? And sort of almost the compartmentalization of these different facets. I'd like to examine the opposite of that. To what extent has being a parent influenced some of your research or your teaching? And to what extent has your research or teaching influenced you as a parent?
I can go first for that one. One thing I'll say that I'll add on to what you were saying, Shelby, is just like the realization that I'm a better parent if I feel like I'm fulfilled, right, in the research and the teaching roles. And I think that was a really big recognition point for me, because it allowed me to get away from the guilt, right? Because I was like, no, I like spending time with him, and I'm a better parent with him when I feel like we have that like separate spaces, right? Whether that's like the workplace for me or daycare for him. I do think that, and this has kind of been touched on upon a little bit, like there is an efficiency to being a working parent, where you just don't have time. So you're just not gonna spend those additional 10-15 minutes looking at someone's CV and comparing yourself, or going on Facebook, right? You're just gonna like hunker down and work. And whether that's like early mornings, nights, so on and so forth. I personally I'm very much of a research person. And so for me, it's really allowed me to develop new aspects of my research identity. And so being able to understand the experiences of motherhood, and for me, the return to work was very daunting. It was a very, very difficult period, partly COVID, partly severe postpartum depression. And so that kind of sparked the idea of allyship in the workplace and what that reentry process looks like. I have research right now that actually looks at how the positive exchanges that we have with our kids can actually spill over to affect us and make us better workers. And that's something that basically came from, very much a reflection of like, what are the few times that he does say "I love you, mama" on his own, like how does that change me on those days, right? Versus the days where I'm like, get out of the house, just put your shoes on and let's go. Like those more like stressful parts of parenting. So there's that part of it that has been really fulfilling, right? And that allows me to do research that I'm passionate about and that I identify very strongly with. And then the last bit that I'll say here, and Joanna mentioned this a little bit as well, I'm very open with my students about what parenthood looks like and what a working mom with a traveling spouse looks like. And so I very much have been on the receiving end of like a, how are you so sick all the time kind of thing. But I think students really appreciate it, especially the other ones, the ones in the class who want to be parents themselves one day, right? You're able to provide a role model for these students of what that looks like. And you're just able to show a part of yourself that I think they can connect a little bit better to, including some of them who've had working parents their entire lives and have experienced this from the child's perspective. And so for me, that's been something that's like really important is always, even if it makes me a little uncomfortable, being willing to be vulnerable and open with my students about what's going on and what day to day looks like. Like I've had to send an email out from the car driving to a class being like, it's a bad day today. Kabir just wasn't willing to get out of the house. I'm going to be 5 to 10 minutes late to start this class. I am so sorry. Right. And just saying it, and letting them know what's going on.
As for me, I think like Nitya, I also did some research. I feel like that's why recently I'm really interested in parenting, like parenthood, like these kind of topics. And I also published a paper on like having these positive family events with your family can help you to become a better leader. So I feel like these are the things that I'm really interested in. And I think for parenthood, that struck me the most is that because I work really closely with PhD students, I mentor them, like work with them. And I feel like sometimes for me, it's really hard for me to like give negative feedback. And I feel like it's like the kids, right? Like how do I teach my kid is like how it's similar to how do I train my PhD student. Sometimes I feel like, oh, I always like think about different ways to communicate, different ways to like talk to them, so that for them to really understand what I'm talking about, whether they will get it or they will comprehend it or motivate them. I just feel like these are really intertwined and related. So I feel like it really helps me to become, I don't know, a better leader or a better advisor. Maybe or not. But I'm trying.
And I would love to jump off on that. This is actually the direction I was going to talk about. I haven't done any specific research on kids, except for the way to parent better, right? I was very much a data-driven, research-driven parent. But in terms of advising PhD students and advising my undergrad honors students, I think when I was a younger faculty, before I had kids, I wasn't very patient with these people. And quite honestly, I'm embarrassed to say that I oftentimes would actively lose my temper with their lack of progress, with their inability to get the work done that we had agreed to at our weekly meetings. And I would treat them in a way that I think of as a bad parent would treat their child. There's no bad parenting, but I think there are better ways to parent. And once I learned some parenting techniques, even though I had less patience to give because I was using it up on my own kids, I felt like I had a better perspective on like, okay, well, really your advisees are in many ways like kids. Sure, you don't have to teach them how to tie their shoes or label their emotions, but you nonetheless have to communicate with them in an effective way. And having never worked before and having never managed other people, this was a perspective that I was able to gain through parenting. And I think it's made me a better advisor. I have to survey my former students to find out if that's actually the case or not, though.
Yeah, let me just add a very short thing. So it's similar to my research or teaching, the contents itself has not changed as a result of becoming a parent. But I do find myself having more empathy and understanding toward people who have kids now. I teach the MBA program, and so my students are a little bit older, and many of them do have kids. Some, have kids during the semester. Some, kids get sick and whatnot. And I think in the past I'd have said, that's your problem, not mine. But now I totally understand what that looks like and what they're going through. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you can have another week to do your homework, or, I'll give you some extension on this. And I really feel sorry for what you're going through. And so now I can really put myself in their shoes, which I feel like, again, like as Joanna and Ye said, might make me a better instructor in a sense that I now know my students' lives a little bit better.
Well, I mean, the fact that the four of you guys have teaching awards, right? I think also emphasizes that there's this high level of skill and connection with students that has been worth recognition. And I can only imagine that having that degree of empathy has been really beneficial in the classroom. I have to say, as a product of a tiger parent, there are instances where I'm just like, don't do it. Rein that back a little bit, right? Not necessarily like complete gentle parenting, right? But trying to tame the tiger a little bit, right? In terms of that approach. I do want
Shelby, can I add to that though? Is like one of the
absolutely.
things that has also something that's changed for me has been like setting boundaries more as well. And so like, and I say that in relation to like tame the tiger, but like that's helpful, I think, also to teach our students of what boundary setting needs to look like and what respecting those boundaries need to look like, right? And so, because quite frankly, like honestly, before I was a parent, I had like no work-life balance. I was just like, oh, okay, you sent me something at 5 p.m. I'll start working at it at 8 p.m. that night itself. And now I'm very much just like, all right, well, if you send me something at 5 p.m. and you know the next like 6-7 hours are my home time and then it's bedtime, then that's just something you're gonna have to work around. I'll get to it tomorrow, but if tomorrow's a day where my kid is sick, well, like my kid is sick, right? And so, and I don't mean that in like a cavalier way. I just mean that as like that's a healthy part of all of this, as it has been a healthy part of it for me as well. And I think it's important to as part of the mentoring process for our students, whether that's like undergrad, masters, MBA, PhD students, like to also recognize like when you're working collaboratively with other people, that's part of it. And so sometimes I do let the tiger out, I think is what I was trying to say.
You let the tiger out for in creating those boundaries, protecting your kid, right? As opposed to, expecting them to do multiplication when they're 1 year
Yeah.
old.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, I do want to jump off one point that you had made, Nitya, which was talking about being a role model, right? And sort of being an example of a working parent, particularly for students. And one question that we got was basically if there's such a thing as having a best timing in becoming a parent, right? Would it make sense to have it try to have a child during your PhD? Would it make sense to have it during your assistant for early years of your assistant professorship? I also bring this up and related to your question to this talk about mentorship is because I had received some well-intended advice, right, which was basically like you want to focus on getting things out, getting published, etc., right, and then worry about other things after tenure, right? And I mean, I finished my PhD when I was 32, right? And I was just like, I don't know when I'm going to get tenure, and I can't really afford to wait at this point, right? So being a parent, starting a family was very important to me, and it was one of those things that I it has made my life very drastically different and has made certain things harder, of course, right? But it sort of pushed this balancing act in a way that I was willing to achieve. So I was just wondering for the panelists here, what do you have any thoughts about the perfect timing, or even put differently, do you have anything that you wish you had known before you became a parent as sort of preparation? I know Emily Oster, to your point of that research-minded parenting was the Bible. So that using that as sort of a research-guided way to parent has been really useful. But what other thoughts do you guys have?
I actually feel like there's no perfect time for like having a kid. I have my kid one like when I was a PhD student, like right before I got on the job market. I remember when I got on the job market, I just had my baby, and when I went to fly out, there are some people like, what? You just had a baby? And some people were like, oh my God, you're not going to publish anymore, or give that sort of comment. I'm like, no, I will still work, or But and then my second one, I had it when I was assistant professor, going to be promoted to be a social professor. I feel like things are a bit different. I would say when I was a PhD student, when I went on market, that was really tough. But well, I think things change, right? Even when I'm an assistant professor, I still have my job. I need to teach. Teaching is not the time, like, especially I'm teaching like professional MBA. It's not like my kid is sick. I can't cancel the class. No, I have to go, right? As a student, probably you have more of a leeway, like, like maybe when you are fourth year, fifth year, you don't need some students don't you don't need to teach. You don't have those obligations. So I just feel like it's just different. There's no perfect timing. It's just when you're ready, if you're ready, and this is the time for when you to learn work-life balance, right? Like you really need to learn balance. Just like Nitya, previously when I was a student, I don't know anything about work-life balance. I'm a workaholic. I can take my computer and laptop. I can work anywhere. My husband always said that, oh, just give her a computer, whatever it is, just put it on and just start to write or like work on her stuff, right? Like I'm always working. I don't have a life. But after I have a kid, I learned to have a life. So I feel like this is something that I feel like I really cherish this. This is like a gift to me. Like I learned to like enjoy my life and then work as well. Both, like to enjoy both work. So I feel like I really like work-life balance right now.
Yeah, so I agree that there's no perfect timing. And I think really parenthood just makes you a parent, like becoming a parent makes you a parent, and you'll figure out how to deal with it. So there's no such thing as I'm like super 100% ready, so I'm gonna have a kid. Like if you have a kid, like just you have to make it work, and so you'll figure it out. So I think in that sense, there's not really a good timing, and it just comes when it comes. One thing I tend to think about a lot these days is the following. So so one thing I do appreciate having a kid a little bit later and having it when my life was a little bit stable and I had a job was the fact that I tend to compare myself with my father who had two kids during his PhD a long time ago. And my dad started his PhD quite at a very at a later age, around 35. He finished around 45. It took him 10 years. He did a PhD in political science. And then during that time, I remember we had a lot of financial hardship. So him being a student in political science, not having a very big stipend and whatnot. And I remember, my younger days kind of feeling frustrated. I want to do this and I want to do that. I want to get that toy. I want to do this sport, but my parents can afford it. So I felt a little bit frustrated. I'm sure my parents felt frustrated in the same way. And now when I'm dealing with my son, I feel that I have the stability or financial stability to make things work for him. I can send him to daycare. I can buy him the toys that he wants. And eventually I can send him to a good school. I can send him, buy him toys or whatnot, right? And so that part I think I do appreciate, and maybe that's one thing you might want to consider when having a child. I know that PhD students, they end up being great parents and doing being very supportive to their children at the end of the day. So I'm not saying that because you're a PhD student you shouldn't, but those are things I feel when I compare my life with my parents.
I oh go ahead.
Please.
I think that I agree. I mean, like there's just no right time, quite frankly. I think when it is right for you and your partner, that's the right time, no matter what anybody else says. I will also always admit that I very much fell into the trap of like I was not gonna have a kid before I went up for tenure. That was always my plan. My husband wanted kids, and I was just like, don't even think about it before I go up for tenure. I'm gonna be the person who puts her packet in and then maybe thinks about it. And life just didn't happen that way. And I think that's scary also. Like, I think it's important for us to recognize that we don't have a lot of role models of people in our field having kids before tenure. That's just that's just not there for all the reasons that you mentioned, right, Shelby? Like the norm surrounding parenthood, and that there are reasons why there is a drop off in the number of women who make it to full professor because of all the other additional components of becoming an associate professor. And so like that's one thing to remember as well. Like there's always going to be more, right? If you wait until you get tenure, well, now your teaching load's going to increase, your service load's going to increase, and you're going to be older. And maybe that affects your ability to have the number of kids that you want. Maybe you're only able to have one instead of three, you know? And so like I think it's really important for us to just kind of center ourselves in this decision and our relationship, and as a field to do a lot better about how we value productivity and how we think about tenure cases. And I think we're doing it. Like I do think we're on the right path, and it's kind of up to us to keep like fighting and changing for that. But that you have to put your health and your relationship first, and what you're ready for.
Yeah, really nothing much more to add. I think that everyone receives the don't have kids until tenure, but the time that's right for your spouse and you is always the biggest consideration. And we knew we wanted to have kids. I was 30 when I started as an assistant professor, and we thought there's not going to be a best time. So the best time is actually really just the earliest time, because from the way we thought about it, we want to not be that old when our kids are older. I played basketball with my dad growing up, and I cherish that memory. So I didn't want to be so old that I couldn't play basketball with my kids. And I'm happy to report nowadays I have my 9-year-old is good enough where with a little bit of help from his 7-year-old brother, they can beat me on days that I'm feeling a little bit tired in basketball. No, I will cherish those memories. And if I was 10 years older, I might not be able to do that as well.
Yes, the knees are one of the first to go. My son is, I think, the youngest out of all of us here, but he potentially could be quite heavy. So he's 30 pounds right now, and just having to deal with that weight, I'm just like, my back hurts, my knees hurt, right? I'm tired from not sleeping. So in that doing this when you're 35 versus 45 or something like that, it would be it's quite challenging there. But I do think that the overarching kind of agreement is when you and your partner agree this is the time, then that's sort of the right time. And that actually connects to something that Ye said earlier when he was talking about how evening times are spent with my partner, right? That the marriage is not just sort of balancing the relationship between you as a parent and your children, but also managing the relationship between you and your partner. And I love for us to sort of talk about the ways in which our partners have helped us and helped with this balancing act. I will say that my partner is an academic, right? So in contrast to Nitya with the traveling spouse, and we're fortunate to be at the same school, and fortunate to also be under the same tenure pressures in that way. But I will say that I can't imagine just my life has been a lot easier because of him stepping up and because of him sort of being there and being a great dad and being an awesome husband to me. So kudos to you, Dylan. But I also would love to hear kudos and how your partner has helped you.
I mean, I think it's impossible without a supportive partner. The early years in particular, there's so much to do with parenting that there has to be a balance at home too, in terms of splitting up the work. Oftentimes it meant one parent taking as all the kids for a period of time, so the other parent will have a little time to catch up for work. For me, I had a working spouse. She took maternity leaves, but beyond that, she worked from 8 to 6 every day, and she had a commute. So this is why I was the drop off and pick up parent. And we often talk about this now, looking back. Had we had even slightly less flexibility, I'm not quite sure how we would have managed it. Because as you know, kids get sick, and in daycare, kids get sick a lot, especially pre-pandemic. I don't know what it's like these days, but man, your kids would be sick all the time. You would be sick all the time. Like as an adult, you don't really get sick anymore because you aren't exposed to so many germs. But once you have kids, all those daycare germs just come back all the time. And figuring out that ability to both be healthy and to thrive in all elements of your life really requires a supportive spouse.
So I can go, I guess. My wife is she's a pianist, and she actually started her master's program at CMU after I joined here. And so she's in school, so she's full-time student. And so we both have flexibility, but also a pretty, a tight schedule and so I think we've been in a very good collaborative kind of relationship in order to make things work. And one thing I think that really helped was to let the other person know way in advance what the schedule looks like. And so we almost have like a semester long kind of calendar that we share. And so we can kind of, I say anticipate or I say prepare for things that might go wrong and make sure that there at least one parent that can take care of the kid as if things go wrong and can't, the kid can't go to daycare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And knowing that in advance, I think really helped us to manage that kind of balance.
Yeah, so it's a bit trickier. It's a bit trickier when you have a parent who when you have a partner who travels a lot because it's just inflexible in many ways. And it's funny because when he's home, he's working from home, but when he's gone, he's really gone, right? There was a period of time where he was basically traveling like every week for 6 to 8 weeks, especially at the start of the year. And so the primary parenting definitely came to me, and it was also the time when Kabir was falling sick all the time. So there was a lot of frustration build up. And I think that that's important to recognize as well. Is like, that's going to happen and it's okay for it to happen. And so I think I like the way that you use that word, like collaborative. It is very much that. So it was very much like okay, everything feels like it's falling apart right now. I wasn't getting any work done. Kabir was sick. And when Kabir's sick, he only wants me. Rahul was traveling. And so when Rahul came back, my husband, he was just like, okay, I got this. Like, you go. And so that trade-off, I think, is really, really important. And I think it also helps you feel seen, right? By your partner to be able to be like, okay, I'm glad you see that this has been an absolute like crap show for me the past couple of weeks. And I think one thing that we do is we also make sure we get time for ourselves, like Ye was saying, where like otherwise I feel like when we're at home, it's always logistics, like who's doing pickup, what's for dinner, what's this, like are we out of diapers? And so getting those like date nights is really important because it allows us to focus on ourselves. And then like what we often do is like nearly a month, every 2 months, we kind of take stock of like, okay, what's working, what's not working. And so sometimes like I'm like, it's not working for me that I'm doing all the drop off and the picks, right? So I need you to step up a little bit. And so we actually, I think that's really important as well, is like recognizing that what might be working for a certain amount of time may not work forever. And so you need those checkpoints essentially to have those like, okay, this is what needs to be adapted and how. And also same, like our shared calendar is one of the most important things because it tells me like if what as soon as travel is booked, it goes on that calendar. So I know, do I need a babysitter, right? Like what is the reinforcement that is necessary at that point in time?
Similar to Nitya, my husband actually work in another state, so I think that as a difficulty because he's like academics, he cannot find a job that is close to me. So this is how we just started like he just moved to another state like last year. So this everything is really new. That's why we are kind of like that's why I hired a lot of help. I feel like if I don't have a partner like to help me on a day-to-day basis, I need to hire a lot of help to build my own community, right? Like so that's why I have like lots of sitters, lots of nanny helping me to take care of the kids. But when he came back, like he always help me a lot, like taking care of the kids, put them to bed. I was like, oh, this is the first time I can watch Netflix or I can catch up on work, right? I just feel like I can finally have a break. Jeez, like I always feel, but I feel like I kind of trying to find a balance now. sometimes I appreciate when he, and then honestly, now I feel like previously I never appreciate him like do something, but now when he can be also, oh, I really appreciate he can do this, and that, you know, I feel like I changed my perspective.
Yeah, in the same way that we have greater empathy for our students, and we see our children and them, we have greater appreciation for our partners too. And I think that one of the key things seems to be a lot of communication, right? Making sure that everyone's on the same page. I love what Nitya said when she was saying that something that might be working right now might not be working later on. And I'm reminded of some good some wise words by one Michelle Obama when she was just like, sometimes 50-50 is not always 50-50, right? Sometimes it's going to be 30-70, right? And you just hope that in your communication and your relationship that it's not always going to be 30-70, right? And there's going to be some switches and some recalibration going forward. But it's, you know, as an academic entering the field, I remember being told this will consume your life, right? Research will consume your life. It is the most important thing, right? I want you to live, breathe, and die by publications. And a lot of our conversation has really said that, well, when you become a parent, that just can't be the case, because being a parent is such a profound shift in your change, and you just you can't quit being a parent, right? It's you're with them forever. It's not even until they're 18. My mom still worries about me. And so I would like to sort of conclude our panelists talking about, you know, what are some things that you've done right as a parent? What are some things that you're really proud to have accomplished? Because I like to say that we know ourselves better than anyone else. We know our weaknesses way more than anyone else, and it's so tempting to just focus on what we've done wrong and what we haven't accomplished. I want us to be very intentional to be like, what have we done right? What is something that we're like, yes, I did that, you know, even if something else went wrong the day before or the day after, at least you can point at that and be like, that's something to be proud of. And it doesn't have to be big. So I'm happy to share mine. My son has recently learned to climb on the couch, right? So he lifts his like stubby little legs up like a male dog about to pee, right? And it's like trying his best to get on the couch. And yeah, I of course I like see him struggling a little bit, and I just want to immediately help him. But at the same time, the tiger parent is like, no, let him suffer, right? So my win has been like, I see it and I see him getting frustrated, and I'm just telling him, you can do it, right? Like I don't want to completely step in and take away your autonomy, your learning opportunity, but I also don't like, I want to be an encouraging parent and helping you learn this skill. And he has gotten much better. Which unfortunately means that we have to rearrange furniture due to his climbing ability. But that's something that, like, something small but recent and I think meaningful, and that I was like, I did a good parent thing there. You know, I might not be a perfect parent every single day or in any ways, but this was something that I was like, I think I did my son good. So what about you guys?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I first want to echo something that Shelby said earlier about the importance of your parenting job. I think for most of us, our most important projects in life are our kids. They will have much more social impact than any of our papers will have. And that's right? One of my good friends in academia, Dan Bartels at the University of Chicago, he's a marketing professor, told me that this is actually your most important job now. There is nothing you can do to mess up a paper in a way that you can mess up on your kids. And your responsibility to them is utmost. Like if you're a bad co-author, so what, right? At the end of the day, so what? And if you're a bad parent, that can really be a costly thing. Now, at the same time, kids are resilient and they will adapt to whatever situation. And I think I love this theme, Shelby. I think that as a parent, I'm very proud of my kids. And as they've gotten older, there are more and more moments that you can kind of sit back and just look at them from sort of like a almost detached perspective and think, wow, like I played a role in shaping this amazing person. And I miss the part where people share their children's ages, but I had a colleague when I first had kids who said that kind of like 7 to 10 is a golden age. And both of my kids are in that golden age right now. And yeah, there are bad days, but there are way more good days than that. And like, I love the fact that my kids are great at board games, for example. They play adult board games, they learn them on their own, they beat me at them sometimes. I think it's such a thing to to marvel at, because I used to struggle to find people to get together and play some complex board games with me. And I made 2 of them. And they're always at home and always available whenever I want to play with them. You know, kids can be really amazing.
You created your own demand. Oh, amazing. What else?
I agree on that. I feel like seeing my kids like looking it back, I feel like we can really like change them a lot. Like I can see like my older one now is 8 years old, and I feel like I can see that when he was little, he's actually like the kid that doesn't is not interested in anything, and then he's not motivated. I was like, oh my god, I'm a researcher that studied motivation, and I do not know how to motivate my own kid. I remember I have those struggles, but now he's motivated to learn something. I'm like, oh my god, this is great! Finally, I made it. Like having those moments makes you feel like, oh, I'm really proud of him. And then also another thing is like I'm like trying so hard. I'm like having them to be bilingual. At home, I always told them that I don't understand English. You need to speak Mandarin to me, right? Like I always like try that, but I'm really proud that they can speak both languages. I don't know how long this will last, but I will keep it continue and try this, right? And I even like now I'm in Asia, I even send them to like elementary school here and see how it goes. But maybe they will hate it. We'll see.
Wait, can
But
I
I
can I
like
just
that.
say
Yeah,
one
yeah.
more thing? So I did something similar. So my kids are bilingual in Chinese. We spoke nothing but Chinese at home, even though my wife and I actually generally speak English to each other. She's Taiwanese. During the pandemic, we didn't have school in person here, so we actually did. All of us went to Taiwan for 8 months. So from October through when Taiwan finally locked down, and they had in-person school. So they were in-person school. I took a sabbatical. I did the exact same thing. So when my kids were in 1st and 3rd grade, school in Taiwan in local schools, and their Chinese is great. I'm happy to report. Another thing
Oh,
I'm
really?
very
Okay,
proud of.
that's good to know.
So I'll have to learn something from Ye, because I would like my kid to speak Korean at home, and we're working on it. Actually, his first word is car in English. I'm actually proud of that. I do love cars, and so I'm glad that he shares the love of cars with me. I'm also proud of his of me giving him a good haircut these days. And so there's a lot of trial and error, but now I can do the perfect Asian, like the bowl cut that is like the round all around. I'm pretty good at that, so I'm proud of that. I guess what I'm most proud of when I see my kid is like when we go pick him up at daycare, like even when he sees us from like really far, he would put on like the biggest grin and come like just running at me with his like 2 arms open. And that's, I think, my favorite moment of the day. And I feel proud because I feel like we've now, despite all the worries about, okay, like if you send your kid to daycare and whatnot, you'll not get the love and the connection. But I feel like we've done that job, and we've made that connection, and we've made him feel that he's our favorite person. We're his favorite person, and that he's willing to, come and really welcome us when we come back to pick them up. So I think that's what I'm really proud of, at least for now.
I love all of this. I'm proud of my kiddo for like a lot of reasons. I also love that part as well, like the smile when you go to pick up. You're like, I must have done something right, right? Like
Yeah.
if my kid is picking me when he's sick and feeling really crappy, that means I did something to deserve that. But so I think I want to end on that probably. Like I'm proud of my kiddo for a lot of reasons, but I'm actually also really proud of me. And I hope that, I love this question, Shelby, because I also think it allows us to reflect on like picking the structures that work for us, right? And the caregiving systems that work for us is not easy. And it's really important to be able to stand up for yourself as a parent and for your child. But also to adding to that, I think for me, I've been more proud of, especially as someone who has dealt with a lot of guilt, a lot of postpartum depression, is like knowing that I'm in the right place in the right time, and that I'm choosing to spend my evenings and my weekends with my kid with zero guilt attached. And I think that's something that we all touched on, right? And that's hard on a tenure track in the field that we're in, where it's publish or perish, and it's just like pub. I think it takes a lot to be able to get to that point. And of course, I agree, we wouldn't have gotten there without our kids. But that requires a little bit of like, yeah, we did it and we're here to stay, so to speak, and that we can do this with all joy and no guilt attached, I think is really, really important as well.
Absolutely. Guilt can just suck all the joy out from everything, and it can just from a motivational scholar, right? I'm sure guilt is not great for motivation either. Maybe like guilt induced kind of work. But I do think that in a field where we get so much rejection, where we get so much negativity, where the successes are few, fleeting, right, and very widely spaced, oftentimes, being able to derive joy from an itty bitty person, right? Who plays board games with you, right? Who tolerates your bowl cuts, no, and all of these things. It's wonderful.
Loves it.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure he did. I gave my son a haircut as well, and I'll send you pictures. He was not as amenable to it. But it's one of those things where you're just like, it puts things in perspective. And I think that being a parent is one of the most important choices that you'll make. And it's a choice that's going to outlive you and have that kind of societal impact that we're really looking for. So to the extent that we view research, teaching, and parenthood not as oppositional forces, right? Things that are in constant conflict, but as something that could potentially be complementary, if not even like a positive moderator on certain things. I think that shift in framework and mindset could be very, very useful. I was just telling Sunkee before we began that even though I was complaining about the 3:30 wake up and the sleep deprivation tonight, these things won't last long in both the negative and the positive way, right? Eventually he will sleep through the night very, very consistently, but then eventually he won't need me in the way that I've enjoyed this way. So trying to adopt that positive mindset, trying to not let perfection, right, dictate the way that we measure ourselves and measure our successes, I think is going to be really important. So with that, I realize that we're at time, and I just want to again thank our panelists, our amazing panelists, esteemed panelists, so much for being so honest, for being so transparent, for sharing that vulnerability, and also sharing the joys and things that and accomplishments. Essentially, I think that this is sharing is caring. So thank you guys so much for that.
Thank you for doing this, Shelby. This is
Thank you so much, Shelby.
Thank you so much.
This is great. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I haven't let Parenthood hasn't guided my research yet, but it certainly guides the events that I'm interested in sponsoring. So thank you guys for taking the time and get back to work. Just kidding. send cute pictures of your kids, please, and thank you.
Will do.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for
Bye.
coming. Bye. Thanks, Shelby.
Take care.
Have a nice rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Give my best to Roy.
Will do. Thanks. Bye.
You want me to stop the recording, Shelby?
Oh, yes, I just paused it, so we will